The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is brought to you by Clinica Sierra Vista.
Welcome back to the 17 News at Sunrise podcast, where we share your news on your schedule.
Working in the spirit of the Golden Empire, this is 17 News at Sunrise.
Good morning to you here at 5 a.m. Thanks for waking up with us. I'm Maddie Jansen alongside Alex Fisher.
And we begin this morning with breaking news of two men wanted for murder, leading police on a multi-county high-speed chase that ended here in Kern County. The chase started around 4 p.m. yesterday in San Luis Obispo. That's according to our affiliate KSBY. Sheriff's officials in San Luis say the two men carjacked and robbed someone at gunpoint earlier in the day. They were also suspects in a murder case from earlier in the week. The chase made its way onto Highway 46 through Paso Robles and eventually into Kern County. Reports say the two men eventually got out of their car and ran into an orchard. But Kern County Sheriff's officials were able to find the men. We're still waiting to hear more from Sheriff's officials about the chase, and we'll update you as soon as we learn more.
A car went up in flames after crashing near the base of the Grapevine. CHP says the vehicle caught fire after the driver crashed on the I-5 yesterday morning around 10 a.m. The CHP says a bystander helped pull the driver out of the wreckage. The driver, a woman, was then taken to the hospital with major injuries. Officials closed the off-ramp from southbound I-5 to Grapevine Road for more than an hour for the investigation and cleanup.
New details in the case of a local business owner who allegedly assaulted a would-be thief along with his two adult sons. Scott Sparks attempted to steal cordless drills from a truck parked outside a pool company early April 27th, but gave up when the owner arrived and fired a handgun at him. According to court records, surveillance footage shows John Sparks, the business owner, and no relation to the would-be thief, pistol whipping the man, sitting on his back to zip tie his hands, then kicking him in the head and upper body. Next, John Sparks appears to hold a gun to Scott Sparks' head and continues to kick him in the face, the report says. Brendan Sparks enters the frame, holding a flashlight in one hand and a can of bear mace in the other, before spraying Scott in the face with a 3-second blast. The report also says John hit Scott in the head with a circular saw. Scott Sparks suffered a broken nose, several broken teeth, a large cut to his head requiring stitches, and bruises all over his body. John Sparks and his sons have pleaded not guilty to felony charges.
5:04 now. Let's take you out live this morning to Washington, where later tonight the January 6th Select Committee is set for a primetime hearing where there are sure to be fireworks. The committee's investigating the January 6th riot, interviewing witnesses who had a first-hand view of the siege. NBC's Bree Jackson is on Capitol Hill with a preview of what to expect.
It's been nearly a year and a half since rioters stormed the U.S. Capitol, and the House committee investigating the insurrection will hold the first of at least 6 public hearings. This first hearing is expected to provide an overview of the January 6th committee's nearly year-long investigation. The panel says you can expect a combination of documents the public has not yet seen before and witness accounts of what happened. Those testifying include the first law enforcement officer injured by rioters and a British filmmaker who followed the far-right extremist group, the Proud Boys, as they stormed the U.S. Capitol. In addition, committee members say they will provide the American people with an initial summary of their findings so far. They say all of this is part of their efforts to dig into former President Trump's actions during the insurrection, the election fraud claims that motivated the attack, as well as law enforcement's response to the riot. The public can tune in to tonight's primetime event at 8 p.m. Eastern. At the Capitol, I'm Bree Jackson for NBC News.
And you'll be able to watch the hearing live here on KGET tonight starting at 5 p.m. A special edition of 17 News will air after the hearings tonight at 7.
President Biden is hosting world leaders at the Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles this week. They're discussing policy issues ranging from migration to climate change, with some important world leaders choosing not to go. Washington correspondent Jesse Turner has more.
Most people don't want to leave home.
In her home state of California, Vice President Kamala Harris urged CEOs from across the Western Hemisphere to help the U.S. address the root causes of migration from Central America.
Governments alone cannot address this issue.
To reduce the surge at the southern border, the Biden administration is encouraging new investments to the region. Harris announced those efforts have generated more than $3 billion in private sector commitments, including connecting millions to banking services and internet.
From Canada to Chile, a prosperous region benefits all our economies.
However, none of the presidents of the countries Harris is supposed to work with are attending this week's Summit of the Americas, which Republicans back here in Washington say shows the administration's weakness.
The presidents of Guatemala, of Honduras, and El Salvador are not here because they felt mistreated.
Those leaders chose to boycott the event, as did Mexico's president, after the Biden administration refused to invite the authoritarian governments of Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela.
The most insulting position a Mexican president has ever taken in the last 100 years towards its northern neighbor.
Florida Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar worries how this looks to U.S. adversaries like Russia and China.
Tyrants and thugs, unfortunately, because of this behavior from the United States, are grasping power in our backyard.
In Washington, I'm Jesse Tenor.
Some frightening moments for people crossing a bridge in Mexico as it collapses, and it was all caught on camera. Take a look. Ooh, this happened in southern Mexico Tuesday. At least 25 people were hurt when that bridge collapsed. The bridge had recently been remodeled. Officials say there were more people on the bridge than usual, and the weight exceeded the bridge's capacity, causing it to give way.
No, honestly,
right?
luckily it wasn't a
Exactly.
longer fall, because then that could have been a totally different situation. In your 17 homicide tracker, new developments in a double homicide that happened earlier this week at a veteran's home in Oildale. Late yesterday, we learned a man has been arrested in connection to those murders. 17's Marco Torres has the latest.
Just before 9 a.m. Tuesday, staff at the California Veterans Assistance Foundation found two deceased residents at its apartment complex on Decatur Street in Oildale.
I seen the sheriffs going by, and they were slowing down. I got up and looked, and the whole street taped off and sheriffs everywhere.
Then, this stunning development. Deputies arrested Guadalupe Mojica on his 80th birthday at the Get bus station on Chester Avenue. On him, deputies found a loaded gun. He's charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and held on no bail. John Rogers has been a neighbor in the area for 34 years and says he's often seen Mojica in the area.
He stayed a lot around the bus stop area and in that vacant lot back there with the homeless people. But he stood out because he was always cleaner than all the rest of the homeless people.
According to Kern County Sheriff's Office, 2 adult male residents were killed by gunfire.
Yeah, it's pretty scary being that close, 30, 40 feet from my house, because my bedroom's right back there. I don't know. I can't see it getting any better.
Marco Torres, 17 News.
Making news around the state, we're learning more this morning about a military plane crash that took the lives of at least 4 Marines. 5 Marines were on board the Osprey when it crashed near Glamis, which is just north of the Mexican border. The Marines were part of the 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing based out of the Marine Corps and Station Miramar. The Osprey was based out of Camp Pendleton. The cause of the crash is under investigation.
Making news around the nation this morning, and in the wake of a rash of mass shootings across the country, survivors and families who lost loved ones are sharing their trauma with the American public. Tragic stories told yesterday in hopes this will lead to changes in the nation's gun laws. We want to warn viewers some of the testimony is graphic in nature. NBC's Bree Jackson has more from Washington.
Door between our classrooms.
Emotional testimony from victims of mass shootings.
Shot my teacher and told my teacher goodnight and shot her in the head.
4th grader Mia Cerrillo appearing by video and recalling the horrifying moments a gunman entered her Texas elementary school. Out of desperation, the 11-year-old played dead to survive.
I thought he was going to come back to the room, so I grabbed the blood and put it all over me.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
Uvalde's only pediatrician describing the horrors he saw.
2 children whose bodies have been pulverized by bullets fired at them, decapitated, whose flesh had been ripped apart. that the only clue as their identities was a blood-splattered cartoon clothes still clinging to them.
Heartbroken parents say Congress must take action against gun violence.
To some people, to people with money, to people who fund political campaigns, that guns are more important than children.
The moving testimony not necessarily moving Republicans on gun reform measures.
I think it's a mistake to infringe the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens.
Bipartisan negotiations continue over proposals including red flag laws and increasing school security.
Do you feel safe at school? Why not?
Because I don't want it to happen again.
And you think it's going to happen again?
Lawmakers are aiming for the end of this week to finalize negotiations.
Your thoughts and prayers are not enough.
Families sharing stories of heartbreak hope their testimonies change minds and federal laws.
He screamed.
In Washington.
NBC's Bree Jackson reporting. Meantime, the House passed a sweeping gun control bill after hearing testimony from victims of gun violence and mass shootings yesterday. The vote mostly followed party lines. The bill would raise the age limit for purchasing a semi-automatic assault rifle from 18 to 21. It would also prohibit the sale of ammunition magazines with a capacity of more than 15 rounds. The bill includes a slew of other measures aimed at addressing widespread gun violence, including higher penalties for gun trafficking and firearm storage regulations. It is not expected to pass the Senate.
President Biden discussed efforts to pass gun control legislation on ABC's Jimmy Kimmel Live last night.
Please welcome the 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden.
It was the president's first live in-studio appearance since taking office. He faced questions from Kimmel on climate and the economy and why he has not taken sweeping executive action on gun control.
I think a lot of it's intimidation by the NRA. And look, this is not your father's Republican Party. This is a MAGA party. It's a very different Republican Party. And so you find people who are worried, I believe, that if they vote for rational gun policy, they're going to be primaried, and they're going to lose in a hard right Republican primary.
Again, Biden making those comments last night on Jimmy Kimmel Live.
Working in the spirit of the Golden Empire, this is 17 News at Sunrise.
The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is a production of KGET and Nexstar Media Group. For more on all of the headlines in today's show, head to kget.com.